three major institutions. We have the African Commission on Human and People's Rights that deals with human rights generally, based in Banjul. Then we have the African Court that is based in Arusha, and the African Committee that is based in Maseru. But I would like to state this with a pinch of salt, that the fact that we have an African Committee on the rights and welfare of the child, it speaks to the fact that it's the only regional committee on the entire globe that is specifically dealing with children's issues. I think it should be applauded for that. But above all, does it speak to the fact that we have learned our lessons? At times, you learn lessons and you learn something and forget everything. For instance, one lesson that we learned was that when the CRC was adopted, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we learned that there are some specific aspects that it was not speaking to, such as the peculiarities of the African child, that the African child goes through, issues such as child marriages, issues such as some harmful cultural practices, and the fact that we needed to have an actual straight 18 definition. If it's a child, it's a person below the age of 18. So addressing those aspects in the charter that established the committee helped to create bounds to the end that if we are helping this child, whether they are policies, whether it's advocacy, all persons below the age of 18 stand to benefit. Apologies for that. I don't have superpowers. All persons below that age would stand to benefit from it. So the committee, just like the CRC, it uses specific principles that I think are very instructive. For instance, the best interest principle, look out for the best interest of the child, participation, we know those principles. But at times the question is, just like I said, because of the various environments, how do we help states, how do we speak to states to help the protection of children in various environments? This has been seen in specific studies that have been done by the committee. For instance, there was a study that was mapping children on the move, and it established the issues of exploitation, the issues of trafficking. As a result of that, we started having a traction towards developing of a general comment, and there's a general comment that was developed that deals with online sexual exploitation. So, while we don't have a specialized court, our working methods speak to specialization on specific children issues. It's a committee that is made up of 11 members, but each of those members is in charge of 5 countries as a country rapporteur. So where you identify aspects of online sexual exploitation in Africa, you should be able to know who the country rapporteur is. And as ECPAT, you can engage with the country rapporteur to bring this matter to the attention of the committee, and the committee would then use its diplomatic channels to bring this to the attention of state parties. We also have thematic rapporteurs on aspects to do with exploitation of children, children in conflict with the law, children affected by armed conflict. In some way or another, there will always be a certain vulnerability that is on a specific child that you can engage with when you use the various special rapporteurs. There are some other principles that are not among the 4 principles that could still help with helping the child. For instance, using detention as a matter of last resort. So that means if they are child perpetrators, you still first treat them as children before you treat them as victims. There's the presumption of childhood. The fact that they are children, they still have to enjoy the fact that they still have to enjoy childhood. The concept of childhood, it could be subjective, it could be objective, depending on which context you're looking at it from. If it's from the health context, it could be very disseminated. Is it 0 to 5? Is it 7 to 10? Is it 12 to 13? For the committee, we don't disseminate on accounts of age, but we say that you should have different policies that speak to different children. We also of the view that at times we are not able to do as much as we can, but we also work with other organizations, especially at the regional communities. We have regional economic communities, we have regional mechanisms that also take up these aspects very seriously. So while we don't have specialized committees, while we don't have specified legal procedures, but the working methods of the committee can come in handy. We receive state party reports. We always use those to engage with states, and we always ask the civil societies in those particular states to also present a complementary report that speaks to specific problems that specific state is facing. So if online sexual exploitation is one of the problems, we then deliberately deal with it as we are dealing with the state. So that's how I could translate that to the African perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps the last question that I'll try to combine them. Two questions, but I'll try to combine them together because they are quite relevant to what you said. The first one is, from what you said, what are some of the key lessons learned from the experiences in Kenya, in Uganda and Kenya, but also from the African perspective, because the committee is reviewing country reports, right? That can be applied to other countries facing similar challenges in ensuring access to justice. But also, related to this, have there been efforts to raise awareness among legal professionals, law enforcement agencies, and the public about the importance of addressing the issue of access to justice for those children? Thank you.
All right. I'll begin like this. You see, when you have a case of robbery or murder, you have a dead body there. But when it comes to cases of online sexual exploitation, there is this perspective, or there is this thinking that it does not do any much harm, and yet the harm that is caused on a physical offense is the same as that is occasioned when it comes to online aspects. So it's important that we bring this information to the people to understand that an offense, whether committed online or offline, has same implications, psychological, health, and all other things that are involved in it. And to raise awareness, yes, we have done so. But how, from the various mistakes we have had, and we have learned a lot of things, which I thought probably I can share with the rest of the team. When it comes to collection of evidence, it involves a number of stakeholders. I'll have a forensic person who will collect the DNA. Then we also have social workers who will give us forensic evidence as to the impact of the crime. And then I have the medical evidence, and then I have other physical evidence. All of these people may come from different institutions, but we are all working for one person, and that is a victim of crime. So we have learned that in doing an investigation involving a prosecutor early is very critical. So in many of the cases we are handling, we do what we call prosecutor-guided investigations. The prosecutor doesn't take over the role of the investigator, but you guide, because at the end of the day, the burden is on the prosecution to prove this case beyond reasonable doubt. So it's critical that I guide the collection, the preservation, and then at the end of the day, the storage, such that at the time the evidence is presented in court, it is in an admissible manner. So we do what we call prosecutor-guided investigations, and it speaks to the convictions that come with those cases. Because once you have guided, then all of us own the whole process. The police will not blame the prosecution, and we all own the mistakes, and we own the achievements. The other issue that we have been doing that is a good practice is we have also learned that in handling matters of sexual exploitation against children, you can't handle it alone. So we handle it as a team. We have started working with local councils. Our Children Act gives the mandate to our local councils to handle cases involving children, but in many of the cases, they originate from the communities. So if it is starting from the communities, therefore the community has to know how to handle and preserve those small pieces of evidence that ultimately we will be using. So we have involved local council leaders, and then we work together with CSOs. At court, we have court users committee. So this is only specific on case management, and it has LCs, the local councils, it has officers from DPP's office, it has from judiciary, and then it has from police, such that we fast track the movement of cases. Also, when we are doing trainings, instead of the judiciary training alone, then prosecution also training alone, and then medical officers training alone, and at the end of the day, each is producing their own results, which cannot be used by the other team. We would rather train together. So we do also multi-sectoral training, where a doctor will come up and tell me that, you see, for me, in my training as a medical officer, I cannot say that this person is aged 18 years. I can only give an estimate. And then I tell them that, but for me as a prosecutor, I want you to be precise on your age estimation, because it will determine whether I am to prefer which charge. So such that at the end of the day, when the doctor now gives me a report on a medical examination determining age, they know what my expectations are. So we do multi-sectoral trainings, and then we don't keep now blaming each other. We also have small community engagement groups. If we are to do public awareness, we can agree that today we are in this region. I will not go and do awareness of the community alone as a prosecutor. On my team, I'll make sure I go with my OC, CID, who does investigations. I'll go with the magistrate, such that they can explain to the community, such that people understand what justice is on this side, because sometimes decisions are made by court and then the communities interpret them differently. So we want to be able to move on the same ground. So even public awareness, we do them in a multi-sectoral way. Even if we are to have a talk show on TV talking about a particular subject, you'll find a prosecutor there, a judicial officer there, and a police officer there. It makes our work easy and able to follow up. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, I'll add on to some of the things that you have said. So in terms of training, I'll start from the creating awareness and training. The service week I talked about, why I keep going back to that, and the work of the standing committee is a game changer, because we use the sessions, the service week, and before the service week we have what we call the pre-service week training. And this is where we do the multi-sectoral trainings for the court user committees. The court user committees, all the justice actors and some members of the community as well. So FBOs, CBOs, NGOs, anybody who's coming to court forms the court user committee, and it is chaired by the judiciary. Now, during this pre-service week training, we have the multi-sectoral. But beyond that training, we now carry out mentorship, so that during the cases, as the following week, which is the service week, we actually observe whether what we have been teaching the court user committee members, if they're actually applying it. So the aspect of mentorship, because it means that then we instill and institutionalize some of the practices that we want to, that we are training on. So that's one of the key things that we're doing. In terms of lessons learned, and I would like to challenge all of us and those of us in the room, and I spoke about this yesterday, is strategic litigation. Using strategic litigation to advocate, one, but two, also to breathe life into some of the sections of the laws that we have. One of the things that our law, I think most of our laws, I've looked at Uganda and I think Tanzanian laws, some of the laws, they talk about protection and they talk about social protection of children victims, and that obligation being on the state. But we have not activated some of those because the state will keep saying, we don't have money to support, we don't have money to restitute, we don't have money to rehabilitate. But for the lawyers here and the NGOs, we can actually carry out strategic litigation on behalf of the children to remind the states of their obligation on protection of children, especially who are victims. And we've done that in Kenya. There are several cases that have been done. They're recorded in the Kenya law reports. And the courts have pronounced the obligation of the various state agencies and even put a fine to it so that the victims were awarded costs in the cases of sexual exploitation. But in the case of victims, let me talk a little bit about trafficking, which is close to this. What was a game changer for us when we sued the government for victims of trafficking? While we settled out of court, it established an entire section and board and asked and made the government commit some money to support victims of trafficking and actually pay that money to restitute them. Well, if they were restituted, that's another story, but at least it started that conversation. So strategic litigation for us, I think it has worked so far, and I think we should continue using it in Kenya. The last example I want to talk about for lessons learned is collaborative efforts. So I go back to the standing committee and the work of the court user committees. And so far Kenya has, because of this, we have adopted 2 strategies. So we have what we call Justice for Children strategy. And the Justice for Children strategy brings together all the justice actors, all the child justice actors, and they have made several commitments, and they have, and they've said what it is that they will do to make sure that we deal with this question of the broken chain. And the other strategy that we have is specifically for the judiciary. So it's what we call the child justice strategy for the Office of the Chief Justice. And this one again gives that grand responsibility to the judiciary to make sure that they are looking at children and the issues of children all through. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll start with the lessons learned before I speak about the strategy. The first lesson that we have learned and continue to learn is that children are not homogeneous. The same approach that you'll use, the approach that you'll use to help a child who would be a toddler is not the same that you'll use for a teenager. It's not the same that you'll use for one who is under 17. So the fact that all children are not homogeneous, they should be tailor-made approaches to them. Secondly, copy and paste does not usually work. You get this beautiful instrument from somewhere and you copy it and paste it. Down the road you'll be reviewing and you'll discover it's not the best thing that you should have done. Now, because of copying and pasting, you end up having a wrong policy, a wrong law that does not speak to the problem. The other lesson that we have learned is that we have institutionalized silos in our spaces of work. Not because we want to do it, this is how Robert does it, this is how Jeremy does it, this is how Teofan does it, but from the perspective that our institutions expect us to deliver in a specific way. So because organization A does its work in this way, organization B does its work in this way, so you discover that there are parallel engagements that unless you meet in a specific room like this, you'll never know that you're more often than not doing the same thing. So they need to de-institutionalize silos. They need to break down those walls to the end that we deal with the problem being online child sexual exploitation. We put that in the center. We put the child who is affected in the center. From that child's contextual footing, is it in Kenya, is it in Djibouti, is it in Somalia? What are the problems this child is facing? How do we come up with solutions to speak to this specific child? So until that is done, we continue working in those institutionalized silos. But where we put the problem at the center, then we're able to discover, I coming from the academic environment, I'll do research on this matter. I coming from this think tank, I'll do it in this matter. I will develop policies on this matter. I'll go with advocacy in this matter. Being the fact that I'm from a Portuguese-speaking country, I'll engage the Lusophone dialect. A Francophone, I'll see how to engage it from the perspective that we use more of everything has to be in a law, as opposed to the English side where we have common law. So being able to embrace those different nuances is to the end that you've placed the problem at the center and you're dealing with the problem from how you're seeing it. So we all use our strong points to deal with a problem without necessarily wasting resources in dealing with a problem. So those are some of the challenges, some of the lessons that we have learned. In terms of approaches, we conduct advocacy missions as well as a committee. The beauty with advocacy missions, you don't have to have ratified the charter. For instance, we had an advocacy mission in Sudan a few weeks ago. So with advocacy missions, it's to the end that you're telling the country, please do this. If you ratify this, you'll be able to deal with this. We shall be able to help you. Your organizations will be able to get observer status. Your national human rights institution will be able to get affiliate status. You're advocating. For institutions that have for state parties that have ratified, perhaps this is homework to myself and Honorable Theophan to be more deliberate on asking questions about online sexual exploitation. The other approach, we have started the concept of adopting a dissemination strategy for all the activities that we are doing. At times you have very beautiful documents that are 200 pages long, but at times the person who is going to use them might not read them. The child who is supposed to have this information might not be able to read just 5 pages of that document in that language, in the language of the document. So how do we ensure we disseminate to the end that we can work with the parliamentarian, we can work with the CSOs, we can work with troops, we can work with we can work with troop contributing countries, we can work with those that are in areas where there is tension and strife. So dissemination is very critical. I might be speaking about it from a larger perspective, but even in your areas of work, to what extent do you ensure that the person who is supposed to benefit actually knows about what you're doing to the end that he or she will be able to benefit? We also receive communications, which in the national system would be cases, not only contentious, but also advisory opinions. We are still developing aspects to deal with that, but perhaps you'd want to direct a specific answer to a state party without necessarily having had an actual violation in the state party. So an advisory opinion is something that could work, but it's still in the childhood stages. We shall get there sometime. So thank you very much, and I hand over to Honorable Theophan.
Okay, thank you very much, Sabani, Juliette, and Robert. I think I'm looking at, we can take 20 minutes? Okay, yeah. So let's, so because of the microphone, I will add two more minutes. Let's take some questions around the room. Let's take, I think, 15 minutes, and then I will give 5 minutes to you three to conclude. Would that be okay? So yeah. So yes, who can help me with the microphone? He's changing the, okay.
Maybe we'll take yours, fine. So, should I go there? Something is happening there, right? Many hands.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm taking advantage because of Honorable Rob and Honorable Theo are up there. And I want to bring a form of justice that I don't think we have spoken about in this room, the communication procedure, okay? It's a way of ensuring that children access justice by holding state parties accountable. So this is not to Juliet or my friend from Uganda is, thank you, my friend from Uganda, not you, the other one. So how can we be able to use this, like the communication procedure, to ensure that children are accessing like online safety? Because I think it's something you have not spoken in these rooms in the last 2 days, but I think it's something that needs to be expounded. And thank you, Honorable Rob, for saying children do not know about the African Children's Committee. That's what I call it. It's easier for me to call it the African Children's Committee. How can we make it more accessible to children? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next.
Yeah, my question is to the prosecutor. I know, do you have child interview protocol in Uganda for use by prosecutors? Because I know in Kenya, we don't have a specific framework or protocol. Maybe the prosecutors from Kenya can say. Because there are other countries do subscribe to a certain, framework in the way that you go about the interview of a child witness or a child victim. The second one is about the anatomically correct dolls. Could you expound on how you use them and whether there are guidelines to using those dolls or figures? Because the literature, the research on the use of anatomically correct dolls isn't conclusive about their effectiveness, and in terms of, although of course they're used in many jurisdictions, but it's like divided in terms of suggestibility and even triggering children. As a practitioner, I have seen that you can have the dolls in a child therapy room and you have a sexually abused child, but they'll even avoid the corner where those dolls are placed. They'll not even go there. So are there guidelines, or does a prosecutor just bring some dolls and tell the child, show me where you are touch the doll and show me, are they trained? Because I think there are guidelines and there is a specific training so that they are both sensitive and they avoid either re-traumatizing the child or suggesting or leading the child to say certain things that may not have happened.
Yeah. No. Sorry. There we go. I wanted to take advantage of the special rapporteur here, on children affected by armed conflict. If I am not mistaken, I heard that, right? So the committee of expert member. So we wanted to ask a question, what are your reflections in terms of children sexually exploited in the context of armed conflict in Africa? So several countries, I understand, are struggling with these issues, and from the expert committee on the rights of the child, and from your own perspective as the special reporter. Over.
Well, thank you very much. My question is a bit of on a low level, if I can say, but I think it's a problem I've seen everywhere. What would be your comment on, because when we're talking about children accessing justice, we have an issue where the ones who report cases withdraw. And so many cases are withdrawn, and then children are left. They can't access justice because the ones who report the cases end up withdrawing. So how do we handle that? Thank you.
I think I have three. Okay. There will be the three. So the lady at the back there, you and yeah.
Thank you for that. I have two questions. My first one is just a follow-up to what my colleague here said about the dolls. And studies or research in the recent past have shown that calling out things for what they are, in this case the bodily anatomy, makes it easier or makes it more serious, and it makes the crime easier to be addressed as it is, other than saying, my private part, my coochie, the terms we use to cover the embarrassment behind it. And I'm also coming from the point where I understand the African culture, whereby at one point sexual conversations were a taboo. But how do you feel, Madam Prosecutor, about this? And do you feel that we should move to an era where we can call body parts for what they actually are without feeling embarrassed, and that will act as an empowerment to these churches? But we find that these organizations could get from working together. So how can we as international organizations help in breaking these parallel engagements and bringing together local institutions to be able to work together to achieve the common goal? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So my question involves children that are the most vulnerable, and it probably is children who are migrants or children who are in conflict situations, but I'm talking specifically about disabled children. So in my organization, we provide services to deaf children specifically, so that's where most of my knowledge is. And so throughout these last 2 days, whoever that is, they have very few people in their lives who are language interpreters. They have incredibly low language levels. They find it incredibly difficult to express themselves. They often have to work through an interpreter. There are even more delays than in a typical case. The gathering of evidence is jeopardized because of all of these communication issues. They are not able to access social services and get therapeutic help, and if they do, it's likely, again, through an interpreter, which is not an optimal situation at all. And even if they do manage to somehow get into the legal system, there is, again, one barrier after the next. There's generally not enough evidence. Because of all the barriers they've already faced along the way. And again, it's communication, having to work through an interpreter. And I really question how many cases of a deaf child have ever made it to prosecution. So whilst this is an entire other conference that we're talking about here, I just had to raise that voice in all of this and to say I'm interested to know from all of you, do these types of conversations ever happen? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a comment and a question to Hon Robert. Over the last 2 sessions, I've had a chance of attending the committee sessions. And to upload the committee, increasingly, you find that children are having a chance to either have meetings with the committee, like the way it happened, or address the committee as a whole, which is something commendable, because increasingly it will continue like that. Then again, there's someone who said in one of the group meetings we are this year, on the Day of the African Child, on the 16th June, the theme will be the rights of the child in the digital environment. So it's an excellent platform for us to use to especially raise awareness among member states and partners on issues around OXIA, so we can have that in mind. Then the question I had is about the regional legal framework, the African Union Convention on the Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, which talks about like criminalization of child pornography. You find only like 13 countries in Africa have ratified it. I'm just curious to see what can happen for the other countries to ratify, because some things like OXIA, they cut across countries, and sometimes having common legal frameworks is a good thing. Then lastly, you mentioned about like a case being brought to the committee. I'm just curious about what actions you are likely to take when it is brought to your end to address the first point you did. Thank you very much.
Okay, let them respond.
Thank you so much. I'll start from the point that is very dear to my heart, the children with disabilities. When you talk about availability of sign language interpreters, the fact that they are not there is bad. But also in many of the countries we live in, if a child is born with a disability, most parents do not take them to school, so they don't have access to the official sign language that you're talking about. However, many of these children do communicate. They have developed local ways of how they communicate with people at home, so we can't say that they don't communicate at all. It's a challenge dealing with them, but now for us back home, recognizing that it makes them double vulnerable to abuse, we have agreed as a court system that for children who have been to school and can understand the sign language, we'll ensure that we have sign language interpretation. Even at ODPP office, we have a sign language service that comes in occasionally every time we have such a witness. So you call in a sign language interpreter to do the interpretation. When we go to court, if I have such a child that does not understand the official sign language of ABC, it is always recommended that I'll take the evidence of the mother or the caregiver at home who they communicate with or who understands what those signs are in the local language, and then after that I can call in the victim or the child to come and testify, such that this person can take the oath of an interpreter and they can offer the interpretation services. And many of our courts have been okay with that. Of course, it comes with its own challenges when the advocate the advocate representing the accused comes in with questions of cross-examination, but the understanding is if the person has taken an oath, then they will tell the truth about the interpretation. So that is how we are trying to overcome that issue. Back to the question that my sister asked, that how do I feel about calling our body parts what it is. Of course, for me as a prosecutor, the burden that is placed on me under the law is to prove a fact beyond reasonable doubt. And in these cases, I'm required to prove a sexual act, to which if I would have a child or a witness that is resilient to mention them by their names, I am a very happy prosecutor. However, even if I took a sample of some of the experts in this room as to what you have taught your children to call those body parts, you'll find that none or majority of you have not taught your own children to call them what they are. You have given them pseudonyms. Some of you teach your children to call them flower, others call them susu, others call them cocoa, from different families. Each has its own name. So I have to place myself in a community where I have to serve the people and not myself. Because if it was up to me, I would be a happy girl. But now I am living in a community where even experts themselves, even medical doctors, don't teach their children to call them by those body parts. So what do? I have to be innovative if I must get justice for those children. And in fact, for us, when we started using those dolls, we intended them to be for children. But now when you call the mother or an adult witness, they are the ones who are using those dolls most. You ask them what happened, and the witness tells you, I found him using my child. What do you mean using? He had made the child his wife. What do you mean that he had made the child his wife? And he was sleeping on the child. All of those statements are turning around, but for me, I am looking for sexual act. And the witness goes round and round and round, and that's why I'm like, have the doll, tell me, what did he do? Touch here and touch there. And therefore, that's the quicker way I can use them to have evidence on court record that everybody else will understand. And depending on also the level of how gender sensitive the parties are, sometimes a judicial officer, you may find them when they're not very gender sensitive, and they want to push the child to speak those heavy, strong words. Some will tell you, no, I have understood, and then they go ahead and write. But there are those who will just stubbornly refuse to understand when the witness talks about sleeping on them, using them as a wife, using them, something like that. So that is how we came up with the use of dolls. Then lastly, she asked about the use of the anatomical dolls. Of course, before I go to court, I introduce the dolls to the witness from our office as I prepare them for court. Every lawyer has to prepare their witness before they go to court. So we have child-friendly spaces, and in our child-friendly spaces, there are no chairs, because chairs bring in an aspect of authority. There are no tables. We all sit down with the child and then have a conversation with the child, and then they can tell you what to do. So I introduce the dolls to this child. Depending on how they receive the doll will determine whether I can use them in court or not. And we train the prosecutors on how to bring them or how to introduce. So you have to use, of course, the law, the language of lawyers, having open-ended questions, and then you introduce. If you assess the child and then you see that they are having difficulty in expressing actually what happened, that's how you now begin introducing the dolls. But you'll have had a pre-session meeting, of course, with the defense lawyer and then with the judicial officer, and then you tell them, I have a child who is a witness, and these are the tools that we intend to use in making sure that the evidence comes to court. So all the defense lawyers, the prosecutors, and the judicial officers are all trained on how to use the dolls. The body parts on these dolls are more pronounced, like they are not like play toys for the children. Of course, in the room we have toys that they can use for play. We also make sure that we also explore all other forms of languages that the children use. And for those who are in this room, you know that children can speak either the verbal communication, or they can use art and play, or they can demonstrate. But we know that children are easier in demonstrating than in the verbal communication, and that is why we use those dolls. So when you say protocol interviews, we have just a structured way of interviewing that we do, especially when we are dealing with children. It comes from how you're dressed, the questions you ask, the language you're using. We don't ask complicated questions, you ask simple questions. And that way you introduce the doll. So by the time you go to court, the child is aware. Then also in court, they are not going to meet with everybody. They don't mix with everybody. They go to a special room where they sit to ensure safety and protection. Probably something I didn't mention is that these procedures are known to all of us. So it's a standard process. The police are expected to do ABCD. The prosecution is expected to do ABCD, such that it goes across from the entry point up to the exit where the court will handle the children. And also in court, of course, as a way of ensuring that we give them special seats in court. It may look silly, but it works magic for a child. A special seat, you can place their chair next to the judge. Some of them are very generous. They offer the wig or the gown to the child, and then they feel important. And at the end of the day, they are able to give us the evidence. Thanks.
All right, I will just chime into two questions. First, we do have actually children prosecution guidelines, and the prosecutors, I think they launched them maybe 2 years ago. So it's something they're starting to institutionalize and inculcate, and I'll ask that the lawyers in the room to make sure we hold our prosecutors accountable to use those guidelines, because they do include an interview protocol. On the question of withdrawing cases, from my experience, children withdraw cases, one, because the cases are instituted by parents. Parents, and they are sometimes forced, or sometimes they withdraw cases because the parents are saying withdraw the cases. I had a case where 2 parents came to see me and they said, well, I want to withdraw this matter. And I asked the parent, is it you who was defiled or is it your child? Because they were defiled by the neighbor and they felt that if they continue with the matter in court, it will bring acrimony between the neighbors. And I asked the parent, did you experience what your child actually experienced for you to want to withdraw the matter? And at this point, I brought this matter to the attention of the Department of Children's Services, who took the child to witness protection. In our case, it's not very good, but at least it's better than having the child sit at home with their parents who are telling them to withdraw the matter. And the matter proceeded. But to help that child along that trial process, we had to also include counseling, which I said for us is a challenge to have because we do not have counselors everywhere in this country. And the Ministry of Health, we haven't really had that proper collaboration. But we really needed to bring that, to help the child through counseling. So that's how we have dealt over time with cases of withdrawal. And also just to really ask ourselves that question, what is justice for this child? I'm happy, I think for us in the Human Trafficking Act, the Counter Trafficking in Persons Act, says that, we cannot force the victim to actually follow through that matter to the very end. But I want to challenge the thinking that we only need the victim to be there to testify. I think we can use victim impact statements and evidence from the police to actually carry out the case to the very end. But that's a conversation for another day because that brings a challenge. The last question I want to deal with is this question of institutionalization of silos because different NGOs are supported differently. I just want to encourage us. I did work for NGOs before. And yes, it's true we have to be funded for specific things that, those are our mandates as NGOs, or at least what we have been established to do. But to remember that our work is supposed to support the government to give services to children. And therefore, that means that even if I am an NGO and I'm funded only for giving, say, legal aid to children, and I have another NGO that is supposed to support children in terms of psychosocial support, if we can put our minds together, when we go to visit the department or the judiciary or the justice ministry, we can do it together and give that support together. That is how, in my view, we deinstitutionalize the silos, so that when we go to the government, we go as one voice, but we are meeting our specific mandates. And yes, we do have the conversations about disabled children. Just now I was in a meeting, and we're talking about funding, and this is one of the things that were raised. And I will say this, that our Children Act in Kenya is very specific towards children living with disabilities and addressing the issues in the justice system. And even the child justice strategies, the 2 of them that I've talked about, do address that need, and we're looking at how best and deliberately focus on children who are living with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd plan to start with question 1 and 6 on the communications procedure, but I'll latch on question 3 on institutionalization and how we can deinstitutionalize silos. Just to add on to what my sister said. In addition to working as a collective, I think it's good for you to start thinking sustainability as an organization, thinking beyond the box. How can you have sustainability in case there was no organization giving you funds? Then the other question is, the other answer, how do you look for these funds? What approach do you use? Is it simply, do you go with the perspective, this is a charity organization, will you support us? Or you have a business model, not from the perspective that you're going to make profit, but you have a clear business plan that indicates what you're going to do and what you aim to achieve after doing it. I think changing the model of how you approach how you approach organizations for funding, working as a collective, and also thinking sustainability are very critical. So question 1 and 6 by Mtoto News and Child Fund, the communications procedure. What is this animal? I would start by putting the caveat that it does not conclude a matter to the end that if it's a criminal case, you have to prove all the elements beyond reasonable doubt. Or if it's a civil case, you have to prove on a balance of probabilities. Though it could provide for compensation. The question would be, is it compensation for pecuniary loss or non-pecuniary loss? That could become an academic discussion, which I wouldn't want to get into. But in terms of the communications procedure, it's to the end that the human rights body, it could be the committee, it could be the commission, it could be the committee, it could be the commission, to the end that it can make the recommendation after finding that there has been a violation of human rights. So if a child was sexually abused, which article speaks to that violation in the charter? So the balance of probabilities, what are those terms again? The extent to which you have, the standard of proof is very low. If anything, most of them, at times, they deal with document evidence, affidavit evidence. Of recent now, we do actual hearings where they come and hear, where they come and give the story, but still it will be in line with what has been provided for as the story by the applicant and the story by the respondent. So it's to the end that there is a human rights violation that is established. And if it's established, which specific articles? So what does this human rights body recommend? Some persons say that the human rights bodies make decisions. Others say they don't. I make these comments from the perspective that anything I speak that is to the contrary is my own mistake, because Honorable Teofan is here. But the charter itself does not have the word decision, but it has the word recommendation. So what we do, we make recommendations. But I would like to believe that those recommendations are binding because as a state you sign up to be bound by the provisions of that charter. So if you sign up to be bound, whether I call it a recommendation, whether I call it a decision, it should be binding on you because of the obligation that you signed up for. So in terms of the communications procedure, I would divide it into 3 aspects. The first aspect, when you submit, it's looked at for purposes of form and content. Is it written in one of the languages of the African Union? Swahili is one of those languages. Is it not written in disparaging language? Does it identify a complainant, a child? Does it identify a state party? Is that state a party to the charter? If it does that, yes. Then we look at aspects of admissibility. It has identified the specific violation. It is not written in disparaging language, it's written in one of the languages of the committee. You have exhausted local remedies. Usually this is where the catch is. I know of state parties, or I know of persons or organizations that bring communications and they state that may you use the exception to exhaustion of local remedies because this matter is widespread. It's massive. So the committee will now deal with either using the general rule on exhaustion of local remedies, in that the matter went through the justice processes of the country. It went through the magistrates court, to the high court, maybe to the court of appeal, or with leave to the Supreme Court, and thereafter the person is still not happy with the outcome, and the person decides to come to the committee. That person would say that he has exhausted. But at times, if it's in a place where there are no courts, the question of exhaustion is a non-starter. It does not come. It's not part of the conversation. So you request that they use the exception to exhaustion of local remedies. Or if it's something that has been going on for a very long time. God forbid, in a certain country called Wakanda, there has been female genital mutilation for a very long time. The United Nations has reached out, the African Union has reached out, and the government in Wakanda has done nothing about it. So much as it's not, much as there is nothing to show that it has engaged the legislative aspects, the fact that this specific human rights violation that has gone on for a very long time and Wakanda has been informed and has not done anything about it, the exception to exhaustion would come to the fore. So once the admissibility aspect has been identified, then the state party, then the communication will be engaged on the merits. Okay, was there a violation? What does the documentary evidence show to prove a violation? What does the state say to show there was no violation? In line with of the two, what do we propose as a committee? At times you might have to place recommendations on a matter that are not provided for in the charter. So the committee is empowered under one of these articles, Article 46, to draw on experiences from other jurisdictions, from other jurisprudences of the United Nations and the African Union in answering that matter. So if the answer will come from the Refugee Convention, on the basis of that article, we can get answers from there. If the answers will come from the Disability Protocol, we shall get answers from there. So it's a process. At times it has some kind of gate fencing. You have to exhaust local remedies before you engage. But it should be remembered, it's not to prove a matter beyond reasonable doubt on a balance of probabilities, but simply to prove that there has been a human rights violation. Usually this is because there are many states that signed up, and we always give them that leverage to first try to solve a matter at the national level. Reflections on children sexually exploited. I think that is a small way of looking at it. Don't only look at the space of children being exploited in armed conflict. According to the charter, the committee does not only look to protection of those children in areas of armed conflict, but also areas of tension and strife. So if it's an election petition, that child is still affected. If it is one community somewhere in South Wakanda fighting for pastures, fighting for water, that child is still affected. That child will not go to school, that child will not have health services. So look at it from a grander perspective. Then sexual exploitation, we look at it as at times a harmful traditional practice. There are studies we carried out on conflict and crisis in Africa. And the problem was that some of these girls were being married off to armed men in armed groups. When they came back home, it was hard to have them reconcile back to society. There is that process, it's called DDR, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. Some of them came back with children. It was not a question of reintegration, but it was a question of integration of the children who were born out. So we use various approaches, not only thematic in terms of sexually abused, but in terms of the spaces that they have been in. And lastly, yes, thank you so much. And lastly, the issue around disabled children. I think it's very critical that we establish the state's description, the state's definition of disability. At times it's not only physical, it can be psychosocial, it can be intellectual, it can be mental. When it's wide, you're able to use various approaches. You're able to use CSOs through observer status, affiliate status, national human rights institutions to deal with the problem because there is some kind of national consensus on the definition. For instance, when you look at the 6 grave violations, they talk about killing and maiming of children. They are big on the UN agenda. But maiming is only physical. So that means if there's a disability as a result of armed conflict, which is beyond physical, you cannot bring it under the 6 grave violations. So I think the definition is very important in engaging it forward, in addition to the answers that my colleagues have given. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samali. I'm sorry we have gone way, so I think, we are still around, and perhaps if there are questions that were not addressed, since the people are still around, you can give them directly your responses. So I think we all, I believe, enjoyed this session. You appreciated all the information that was given. And I would ask you really to applaud the three speakers or the three panelists because they have done a wonderful work. But also applauding for the moderator, although he has not respected time.
Well done, thank you. It's time for coffee, I think, isn't it? So let's be back sharp here at 4 for the last part of the day. Thank you. that could be done, which one seems in your view the most meaningful, the most critical one? If you have just 1 minute to pitch something to a decision maker, it can be very locally, or it can be, you know, the government, it can be whatever it is. So let's not focus too much on the audience of the advocacy. It's about everybody engaged in the justice system or in the society at large. But what would you ask to change? Be as concrete as possible. It's suggestive. Let's just draw a bit of a list that would reflect a little bit a form of takeaway from today, right? What are the critical points that you retain from today that could be the center of a tangible advocacy in favor of really changing the dynamic and improving the rights of child victims child victims of sexual exploitation and their access to justice? Is that fair enough? Maybe giving you a bit of time to think and digest the different things that you've heard today. Remember the presentation this morning, and then the working sessions that you've had from South Africa, Uganda, and Kenya. The brilliant presentation we just had as well just now. The side conversations. If you sum it up and you think there is one key element, maybe don't go for the obvious. What today has maybe changed or provoke in your thinking that would make your pitch different for decision makers? Anyone would like to start with a first idea? All right, and Thomas, would you mind writing down, perhaps?
Yeah, the point I made in the morning, again, I think I'm loud enough, right?
Yeah.
Yes, this,
Integrate child protection and justice for... I'm beginning to hate your microphones. All right. So integrate child protection systems and justice for children systems together and for a coordinated approach. Please, Mona.
I want to talk about the need to establish a child-friendly justice system for children in contact and in conflict with the law. The need to do that, and of course it costs a lot of money. In camera, the training that's needed, and the list goes on.
So in other words, you're saying, let's make the system child-friendly at large. Then when it comes to child victims of sexual exploitation, they'll be better served. That captures it well? All right. And we trust that you got that.
don't trust. Let's make the system child-friendly at large.
Yeah. Let's make the child-friendliness of the system the priority that will then serve in terms properly child victims of sexual exploitation. I saw another hand. Oh, please.
Thank you. I would say there is no, from the discussion, there is a multi-stakeholder approach. So if this is the case, building systemic accountability mechanism in place, because that will help us in order to ensure sustainability and making things all responsible citizens for the system.
Okay. So lots of key words in this, but the multi-sectoral approach, we've heard different manifestations of it, practices that are quite interesting, but ultimately making it accountable at the multi-sectoral level is maybe a tipping point. Thank you.
Chairperson, we need to look at the survivors, the children who have been victims, and help them to build resilience, to recover, to be rehabilitated, so that they're able to live a normal life. This area has not been given a lot of attention. So it will be good to help them build resilience, to recover, to adapt away from the exploitation.
Would it be fair to, we need to measure our success by the proven resilience and readaptation of the victims? Is that fair enough? All right, Thomas? Having fun there?
Yeah.
Ok. Daquilo que aprendi, desde o primeiro dia até hoje, falamos muito focalmente em nome da criança, das crianças, mas há uma recomendação, uma ideia que devia também prestarmos atenção. As famílias que criam esta situação e vivem com as crianças, é o pai que viola a criança, é o irmão que viola o irmão. Poderíamos ter uma outra ação também para as famílias, que é para as famílias terem moral, de saber respeitar a filha, respeitar o pai e respeitar entre si, para não praticar relações sexuais entre família. Porque por mais que nós vamos acompanhar as crianças, mas se o assunto é da família, torna-se difícil, porque a criança vai, mas volta para as suas, para voltar ao mesmo lar. Temos que ter um trabalho para as famílias.
So what I've learned since the first day is that yes, we talk about a lot about the children, yes, and we know that, but we know that these violations happen in the family. It is always a father or a brother who is carrying out these violations. So we need to have specific actions in the family so that they can't have to avoid these sexual relations in the house at the family level.
So you're making the connection with prevention and the context in which children are exposed to sexual exploitation and how we think of families as a place of protection, but unfortunately sometimes a place of abuse, right? Muito obrigado. I'm ignoring you for a moment. I'm still going on.
Thank you. It's about appreciating and resourcing mental health and psychosocial support so that it is not being brought in as a crisis or during a crisis, but throughout the process of seeking justice, to prepare the child, to support them during the process and after. Yeah.
Yeah. So mental health is not a remedy, it's a right integrated in the whole journey to justice, right? And the support services that come with it. Anna?
Thank you. I'm looking at if we can enhance the special sessions for court hearings, especially for children's cases. We can fast track cases for children, but also deal with backlogs. If we can advocate for more special sessions, if it can move from, I know Uganda it's a few days, Kenya has now a month. If we can have maybe 3 months in a year, that would do well.
So a permanent feature would be fantastic, wouldn't it, right? So having the pace of treatment of the cases involving children really accelerated. Critical point. Thank you. Tanzania. I'll come back to the three of you.
I think we should be understanding our in-country existing legal framework so that we can tap in for the pushy factor to make some changes. For example, for us in Tanzania now, we have been building the police gender desk, which caters for the children interviews, but we are still facing the problem where now we haven't trained more police officers to pursue the work. So I think we need to understand as implementers and service providers to make sure that if we know better what is we are having in the country, then is likely for us to push the changes.
Could I say, let's build on what we have? Is that fair enough? Would that represent what you say? Yes. Yeah? On what you have and the best practices.
We may explicitly mention social workers, and so making sure that social workers are involved in the justice process. And that will solve a number of issues that are mentioned above.
Thank you. I think for me is to the topic, the discussion that we're heading either to say, I think we need to define justice in this aspect to say, what does justice mean to children that have experienced violence across the spectrum to everybody so that we can have the same understanding. It's not like me being thieves breaking into my house and then I get caught and then somebody go to prison. That's not enough. So let's redefine and make sure that we have the same understanding of all the levels of really what we mean to justice to children. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really hopeful that you'll seize that in 5 words. So, but that notion of redefining justice around the experience of children, around the outcome for children. Yeah? Whew. Thank you.
Mine on, in terms of advocacy is around the advocating for budget allocation. All this is good, but not possible without budget allocation and actualization. So there is allocating and what actually gets to them.
Making sure the investment follow the commitments, right? And they're spent, not just committed, but spent, right? There's 3.5 and 4. Okay, so I'll start with South Sudan. It's good to hear from you.
Okay, thank you very much. In South Sudan, there's a need, for advocacy to have a child-centered institution that is focusing and prioritizing, children issues. For example, as my colleague Robert said, when they went to South Sudan, we are one of the 5, states that have not ratified, the African Charter, and the problem is because, people are not prioritizing, children problems in the institutions. Exactly.
Thank you.
We must always make sure that we include services for children with special needs in our programming.
Very good point. Thank you. Special needs.
Yeah, just to, if you may permit, let me just add to what she said, that we could make special needs or children with disabilities, making it a cross-cutting team. That's in all our interventions, we should have it. And then secondly, I'll suggest that we also try to work to see how we can enforce or empower or strengthen the traditional justice systems to be more child-friendly.
Okay.
Yes, traditional at grassroots.
We need both systems to be child-friendly, right? So linking up the informal system in the effort to make the whole system child-friendly. Thank you. We're coming back. We're going at the back. So yeah, it's because we love you. That's all right.
Now, I want to add a point which we discussed in our group on the need to communicate the successful conviction rates of OXEA cases so that we can build the trust in the communities to report, because they'll actually be able to see something has happened. So the need to communicate back to the community on successful OXEA conviction rates in court.
would it be fair to say we said the result can be conviction, but even if it's not a conviction, at least the part of communicating it back is still relevant, right?
But the successful ones, because people have been abused and they want to see justice being served.
Okay.
So also in addition to what this element has to come out.
Okay. Thank you. Please.
I think mine is adding to number 7, the speed of the justice process. What about also advocating on bringing the courts to the community? Permanently. Not that they need to go to a regional court somewhere far away, because at least if it's near, then survivor fatigue is eliminated.
Proximity justice, right? To make it close to the people. Thank you.
Thank you. For me, I think the biggest advocacy ask would be for government to develop programs that build agency and support participation of children, because we realize the same cohort is offering support to each other and they are not able to talk to adults. So if you invest in building the agency of the children and create spaces for them to participate meaningfully, we are going to create solutions for the children. Thank you.
It's like a societal opportunity. If overall our children have more agency, then the experience of justice is more reasonable and possible. Thank you.
Well, I'm also thinking to enhance knowledge or learning amongst us. Probably we need to identify and document the good practices, what is working in the different countries on fighting sick. Yeah. So we need to identify and come up with and just document the good practices. Just to enhance learning, I would like to know what is happening, like I have learned what's happening in Uganda.
Yeah. So building and emulating from experience, from practices from elsewhere. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I have, you can scroll down a little to have number 4, up, number 4. There is a point that I want to raise regarding to put in place supporting measures for social protection of victims, so that they should be encouraged to disclosure the perpetrators. And the experience that we have in Rwanda is that victims do not want to disclose the perpetrators because they are playing around, continue to help them, and tell to the children not to disclosure, to tell that they are the ones. And then we have a big number of children violated, but who should not tell the truth, who are the perpetrators. I think there is a need of playing around that case, so that victims should be ensured that when they disclosure, perpetrators are in court or in prison, but they will be safe where they are. And not only safe as security, but also financially to be able to help their children if they have had some babies. Thank you.
Addressing safety and protection of child victims before, during, and after the disclosure. Okay, thank you.
I have 2 points. The first one, that's why I had to disclose that I had 2 points. The first one is strengthening the prevention area by way of having a multi-sectoral approach to strengthening community leaders in reducing harm for children. Currently, we are going to these communities as different in silos. We may need to just approach them as one, so that we strengthen their approach in ensuring that harm does not happen to children. Then the other issue is about counseling as a profession now. I see a lot of us are talking about it, but we are not pitching it up as this is now a profession. There are people who have been trained to be counselors who can help all stakeholders here within, who are having to work with children who have been abused, and at times they suffer burnout. They also need professional support from counselors. So we need to recognize that within ECPACT.
Thank you. And we'll take 2 or 3 more, and then we'll move on to, because this is a great shopping list, but that's not a priority, right? So, but still, let's populate it.
For me, it's leveraging on technology to fasten the cases and to enhance access to justice for children.
Okay, making a better use of technologies in the proceedings. Thank you.
For me, it will be coming up with measures to progressively include the voices of and experiences of children within the criminal justice system.
Okay, so easing and the voice of children, their ability to contribute.
Thank you. I'd like to pick up on what the Reverend has said in terms of the counsellors being able to share important information across the disciplines. I'd like to even take that a step further and say that we need to, all us disciplines, need to be involved in what I call transdisciplinary healing. Each one of us has the opportunity to provide healing to children in whatever format or whatever stakeholder we're working in, whether we're a prosecutor, police officer, or counsellor. It's the way that we work with children. And I think that that is a transdisciplinary issue that we all need to start investing in.
Thank you, Edith.
I think mine is more or less linked to number 1. I would like to talk about integrated case management, where the different sectors are involved, having a specific referral system in place. And I think linked to that is also, in order to have the tracking of cases, is to have an electronic case management system.
Okay, so it's also a connection with the use of technologies. Now, it's not easy to have all of those ideas in one screen. We would need a couple. But once Thomas finishes typing this one, let's see how much. It's the responsibility when it comes to healing. And it's not just the remit of psychosocial therapists, it's everyone in the justice system who have responsibility in working and taking into account healing. Am I doing a good job, Edith? Yeah?
Not just in the justice system,
Everyone.
Child protection across the system.
Okay, thank you. So we've got several ideas. Just let's try and attempt, because it's a great shopping list, but if we collectively only have to choose a few, which one are the most critical to advocate for today? Which one have the most impactful given the state of affair? Have a look at
living up to their responsibility.
yeah.
Democracy.
And then if we just go up a little bit, at least you can see the first one. Let's put 1 to 12 for now so you can have a look a little bit.
I think they don't like you.
Yeah, I know. I'm attracting that. You can still see at the back? Take mine. Okay. Let's give ourselves another minute, and then after that, let's just see the bottom list. Let's wait a moment and then let's just see, are we able to identify just the most critical one? We might not have the time, we may be doomed to fail, but just trying to see what are the most critical points you think. But you haven't seen the full list yet, so see. So let's scroll down to see the bottom of the list again. Okay. I'm still sort of not hearing. So look at the number and you seem to have been eager. You want to start. You have a question.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think I'm in the position to prioritize, but are we prioritizing this based on what's the lowest hanging fruit? What's the biggest gap? What's
impactful.
The most impactful? Okay.
Most impactful.
Okay.
Given the state of affairs, so we're not in a fairy tale, we are in our realities. Which one are the most impactful? So who wants to give it a shot? Théophane?
No, I want to complicate it a little bit.
That's why we invited you.
I think they're all, well, most of them are relevant, but then we depend on advocacy to whom? I mean, because they are not addressing everybody. There are advocacy there for us CSO, there are advocacy there for government and so forth. So,
fair point, but we can take it from the point of view that we have limited capacities. We have to choose our battle. Which one will then determine that with this one, the audience might be different from another one. But which one we should prioritize, because that's where we can make a bigger difference now. Any thoughts? Monsieur?
Probably the first, third, 12, 13, 16, 24 as a minimum.
So, you want to put them in color or something like that? So let's just write it down. You said
1 second. So 1 third, sorry. So 1, 3, 12, 13.
12, 13.
Encourage you to choose neighboring numbers.
Yeah. 16 and 24. But that's just a first proposal.
Just that. All right. Okay. Please.
For me, I have only one, and that's number 8, psychosocial support for all key stakeholders in the justice system.
Okay. Number 8 is getting more attention.
I just wanted to make a suggestion. Is it possible for us to categorize them? We have those that should go for government, those that require policy, then those that are for CSOs, then we can know what to prioritize depending on the category. So if there are those for government and we have CSOs, we advocate. Then those for government take action, like that.
Brilliant idea, but in a 10-minute exercise, we can't. But after those 10 minutes, we will. Is that a compromise? Now is to say just impact. Think about impact. Which one are key?
My thought was in line with her thoughts, but mine was thematically in terms of the levels of intervention at the individual level, that is the child. What do you want to advocate at the level of the child? It is very critical. around their capacities and, confidence. Then what we want to prioritize at the family level probably, then systemically. Thank you.
And which number is that?
Number 20, especially for children, because already there are institutions that children have and they're talking to each other. So if they were able to support each other, low-hanging fruits, very feasible. Thank you.
And you're voting for your own idea. Am I? Oh, that's. But thank you. Good.
Thank you. I think I'll choose. I think most of the points they are related. They have relations. So I thought 1, 5, and 17 they can be combined into one because they're speaking all about nearly the same thing. Then 16 and 24 is on children. I thought you could combine together. Then 3, 22, and 18 are on community, councillors, and the rest. That's what I'll have chosen for myself. Maybe get the 3 of them and put them into English.
Did you study economics? Or? All right. Any burning thoughts? It's an imperfect exercise, but I just hope it stimulates a little bit of thinking about impact among our different ideas.
Number 23 seems to me no sense in terms as you don't know to whom we have to address it. 23.
Yeah, ease.
23, 2.
Oh, but now you're going to change the number by doing that.
Oh, really? About the technology.
Catching up with you in a second. Just cluster
So,
the way that
the idea is technology. You're thinking it's the most critical one.
To make useful the technology mean what?
You want explanation? No, you're not saying that's the most useful.
I would like to know, do we mean that the parents, for example, have to control the using of internet, or to government, or to companies of communication?
I think all of those ideas are necessary, but I think the spirit of the idea was for the justice systems to gain performance by making better use of technologies. Is that fair? Okay, maybe a last thought? Well?
I'm messing with you with the numbers.
Exactly. So, as you can see, it's totally imperfect, but it's just spontaneously, it's quite interesting. Lots of ideas. I suppose many of them, you had them before. It's not going to, revolutionize the world to have today's discussion. But maybe the linkages between them, or there might be a few that were not so much on our radar, and that's maybe where we're getting a little more advancement. So that's the hope. We'll collect information and we'll send that back to you, right? So don't worry about that. But I would just say thank you for just playing that exercise with me a little bit. And now let's just use the opportunity of having Cornelius and Theophane with us to see what are their thoughts from today's discussion overall. Cornelius, would you like to start?
Thank you, actually. I mean, first of all, actually, it would be to say the transformation of the system. Everybody keeps talking about that and how it will definitely influence the process. So access to justice, from the discussion we were having, seems to start at the police station. Some people even feel it starts at the community level. Right, and there seems to be parallel process. A colleague who was talking about the accompaniment of the mental health specialist, right, throughout the process. Well, one of the things you said actually is that we should have a positive outcome for a child. We should be convinced that there'll be a positive outcome when the child enters the system. I've never sat in a room that's full of lawyers, psychologists, counselors, probation officers, prosecutors, child rights advocates, right? I mean, social workers with such wisdom and understanding of the system. I've never learned so much about the system, its bottlenecks. Usually in Africa, I usually call it the perverse and the
positive incentives inside the system and how the system functions. So from the discussion, I have 3 takeaways. We were talking, I didn't take into consideration Mozambique, but the countries in Southern Africa have this Roman Dutch law, and the colleagues in East Africa, the common law, and I was listening to them on the law reform. There is no cut and paste anymore. The days of cut and paste from the CRC, right, and you then go and get it passed in Parliament, that's over. They are now doing homegrown law reform. It's very clear to me that it's homegrown law reform. And this homegrown law reform, colleagues were talking to me about some of the judges and prosecutors and litigations that influence the reforms that are taking place. But we need to move beyond the reform. I think we have the reform where we need to move beyond the reform. We need to now move really to cost-effective implementation of the system. There are challenges which I see coming up. We need to have cost-effective systems that are fit for purpose for Africa. For example, the court users system for accountability and for unblocking bottlenecks, right? I think these are things that we need to look at. And the outsourcing of the counseling service to child helpline. Government has to outsource more, right, to this counseling service. The public sector workforce will never be able to do that. The second point, actually, and also we discussed, which is very controversial, this gender-based violence court, this child-friendly court. Frankly, I have to be frank, I don't think governments can afford to maintain these kind of facilities, right? I think we need to, as somebody said, integrate. The second one was the precedent and the lessons learned through litigation, the case laws, the practices, and somebody spoke about us bringing all that together as best practice and networks. I got a feeling that colleagues feel a bit isolated, some of the lawyers who are working on this. How can we network and bring them together to discuss what they're seeing and the strategies they're using? And my, colleagues were talking about the Romeo and Juliet issue, and I told them that when I was in India some time back, right, I don't know if everybody is familiar with it, young people having consensual sex, and then they're criminalized. They were talking about it. They were struggling to find a solution. I was in another country, they were struggling to find a solution. And I found that actually here in Kenya and in Namibia, they have solutions to how to address it. So it would be good. On the issue of consent for sexual reproductive health and the post-rape care, I think they've also found a solution here. And children's engagement with the process, that's my last point. How do we get children to engage in this process as a wraparound and a holistic process? I think actually that's a challenge that we would have to address. So again, as the prosecutor from Uganda said, the court is a hostile place. How can we make it a child-friendly place?
Thank you. And immediately continuing with Theophan.
So? I must say that this day has been a quite learning day, and I'm glad that I managed to come because I learned a lot from the different people here, from different horizons. And this begs the question, how can we popularize those country experiences that are lessons learned that we heard throughout the day. But at the same time, being aware, as Cornelius also said, we cannot do cut and paste. We have really to be mindful of our own reality in our own specific countries. Some of the one point I noted as well, we talked about accountability to children. Children must be at the center. But at the same time, the question, and this begs the question of who is responsible for children? who are the duty bearers, and we talk, there are so many duty bearers here, and yet, when we looked at the exercise that Guillaume had us do, we couldn't even agree on 3 or 4 key issues that we wanted to do together. So it shows I think I'm going to hate this microphone as well. Okay. Hello?
Yes.
So it means that the issue is really complex. And as one participant, I think Eddie from South Africa was asking, how do we define justice? What is justice? This is, I think, a big elephant in the room. Are we talking about justice for and with children? Are we just talking about, how do we, when we say access to justice, are we ensuring that children are participating? And is it the only way? Is the criminal prosecution the only way for justice? The main issue, one issue also that came is that the issue of traditional justice and the need really to try to merge what we call the formal with the traditional and draw experiences from these different. A major thing I think that I heard in the room is that, yes, we have great legislation. We all have beautifully written legislation, bulletproof, but implementation is nil. There is no implementation. So that's and this is perhaps also one of the barriers to implementing really access to justice. Communication. How do we communicate to children? And I heard that, I think, quite a number of times this morning. How do we make sure that children themselves understand what violence is? How do we educate them? And how do we ensure that they can communicate as witnesses, so that, whatever the prosecutor decision has to make, it will be well informed. I forgot when we were talking, when I was talking on the justice, I think we have to remember that, we should not forget children with disability. I think that was also an important point that was made. And I think there is a UNICEF participant this morning which said something when in our working group, and I felt that, it was something really interesting. She said, yeah, at the end of the day, what is new? Aren't those things that we are talking about all issues that you are just recycling? What is new? How innovative can we be? And perhaps she can explain it herself. But this is, I think that was a good question. I think we have to go out of our comfort zone to try to be much more innovative and have much more coordination. And I will end by, since you have invited me, by doing some advertisement for the committee as well, all right? And Robert mentioned it. I think we are really calling of all of you to make use, but don't abuse, of the committee. And by that I mean, we have, as you know, we review country report from all your countries. But at the same time, before we review the country report, we ask you to give an alternative report. And we have a closed session review. Only CSOs with the 11 members. And you can be frank, tell us, what is your reading of the country report, so that we can also engage with the country report on their report. There is also the communication system. It can come from you, helping children who have been abused sexually online, so that we can review the cases and take action on that, or make recommendation as we said. Thematic rapporteur, we have thematic rapporteurs, so you can call on us directly, and we can, talk to you and see what we can do and bring the elevated issue at the committee level. And lastly, and I think it's one of the participants who mentioned it, the Day of the African Child this year. The theme is right of the child in the digital environment. And I think so that, you can see, you can really prepare it, discuss issues, and continue doing implementation on the recommendation that was made. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Well, I won't try to do a wrap-up of the presentation, because then I think we heard it, right? I think there's a lot to do. There are a lot of ideas. I think what inspired me yesterday and today is to see that we have the ECPAT family, that network of strong civil society organization across the region. But by inviting all of you as guests, the Interpol, Global Partnership, UNICEF country offices, regional office, a lot of international agencies, the practitioners from Kenya as well as from the rest of the region and so forth, 2 committee members who also joined us. I hope I'm not forgetting anything. And of course, Cornelius, we got, I think what was interesting is that there was little debate about having different point of view. It was a rich conversation, but we're quite aligned. And in some ways, the magnitude of the challenge requires much more collaboration, and that kind of conversation is an opportunity to build bridges. We need UNICEF on board as NGOs, and how can we collaborate better on this, utilizing the committee and the mechanisms at our disposal to amplify our voice and diversifying our ways of influencing the government, the different international and national agencies. I mean, we're all concerned with the same elements. How can we break the silos of competition and really sort of work together more on this? At least, I think on behalf of the ECPAT family, it's been a privilege to have you with us for the past 2 days. And I hope we're leaving with ideas, with contact information, and with opportunities to maybe build bridges and do things together more. So I hope I will leave you with those thoughts, but you do have our contact information, so just reach out if there's anything you'd like to further discuss. If I've already heard many were asking for the PowerPoint presentation on yesterday morning that Sandrine, Michael, and UNICEF, there we go, Martin, you've used. There's a lot of notes-taking that we've done, so we'll follow up on you with that piece of information, but just see that as not the end, but maybe just something we could pursue together from whatever angle. Thank you. Thank you for remaining active, present. It was a heavy agenda. I don't need to stress it. I think you've experienced it. But I think it was worth it. I hope you're leaving with ideas and energies. And for now, I think the Global Partnership is waiting for us with something to drink not too far away. So go around the pool rather than through. And let's make sure then we continue the conversation together. Sorry?
One for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so before we all drown in the pool, tomorrow is on safeguarding. And so we have really kind of apologies for the relentless chasing that we've done in previous weeks for all of the ECPAT members to fill that survey. We've received the input from all of you that we needed to facilitate tomorrow's sessions. But ideally, if you have one, I see some people with laptops here. If you have a laptop with you, tomorrow bring it to the session. Because at a certain point, we will give you the survey that you filled, you or your colleagues. And you will kind of have a chance to review it and validate what you see there. What we've seen in other regions is that maybe the people who filled the safeguarding survey are not the people that are in the room within the organizations and so on. There's sometimes like, oh, okay. There's a moment of validation. If you don't have a laptop, we provide you with a printout for that survey that you filled, but ideally to save some trees and to facilitate the process. If you bring your laptop tomorrow, it would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Guillaume. As you can see in your program, it is not yet the end. We have something at 7 p.m. I was trying to play that, but it's a documentary, Beauty. Can you say something about it? No, I can get it.
Thank you, Willie. I think it's a docu-drama that will really wrap up today's activities. It's a docu-drama that we have developed looking at parents and reporting sexual violence, and for them to understand the impact of sexual violence on their children. Having expertise, also giving assistance. It's a tool that we use to engage the communities, the parents, and we have used real actors from Botswana to do the docudrama.
Thank you, Beauty. So everything will be set up at 6:45 here with the screen, and this is a very interesting documentary for 45 minutes, and then we are going to discuss for 10 minutes, and that will be the end. For ECPAT members, tonight I'm sending the updated version of the program tomorrow. As Thomas said, please bring your laptop as we will have a mapping exercises. But also I think Guillaume will take 30 minutes to say something about the governance issues. That being said, I'm now going to invite for a very brief and short ceremony the director of CAC, our host, who is going to do something.
Thank you, Willie. Thank you. I think we are coming to the end of the day. I want to thank all of you. We want to appreciate all of you. Please pat yourself on the back and say, I've done so well. If you can't pat your neighbor's back. Well, I wanted to give all of you something to live with, but I'm sure you're living here so loaded. But I think there are a few people who we will want to appreciate because of what they have done, and I just want to call them up to come. I want to ask Samali. Is Samali in? She stepped out. Is she away? Maybe somebody can call her as we wait for her. Theophila? And yeah, Theophila, please just come over and ask Yvonne. If you don't mind, just come up. Mama Justa, where are you? Mama J. Mama J, you come over. And I'll ask McBain to come and present something. If somebody can get Madam Samali, if she's very far. Oh, thank you very much.
Can I say a few words first?
Oh, she wants to
Yes.
say something first.
I just want to say. Yes. So, Honorable Theophan Nikiema, on behalf of the entire community of child rights practitioners, I'd like to express our deepest gratitude and appreciation for your unwavering commitment and dedication to the protection and promotion of the rights and the welfare of the children, for your long service to children, from the days of at UNICEF, Lights of Flare, and now with the committee of experts. Your commitment to upholding the principles of the African Charter of the Rights and Welfare of the Child is a testament to your unwavering belief of the importance of protecting the most vulnerable members of society. We are truly grateful for your dedication, hard work, and leadership, your contributions to the advancement of children in Africa. You're a true son of the continent. Once again, thank you for your incredible service to the continent and for being such a shining example to all of us, and for making the time to come to the meeting so that it focuses our attention on getting justice for children when they need it. Thank you.
You know, there are some people, when you look at them, they look very young, but they're not really young. Yeah, so I don't know what the team methodology he used, but what I want to say is that Mama Justa, she's Justa my talker, but in the ECPAT network, we call her Mama J. She has been a real mama. For the last 5 years, she served on the ECPAT board. But I want to say that she doesn't just come from the blues and serve on the ECPAT board. She has been a director for Kiwo Hede in Tanzania. It's one of those organizations that have done great work, and under her leadership, I think it has been great. Some of us knew her when we were small, but now we are getting closer to her. What I want to say is that there are two things in this work. There could be resources, but what is key is the commitment, the passion, the drive that you have. And we are not taking that for granted, Mama J. The drive that you have shown us, you have shown all of us that to work in this space is not about money. It's about the passion that we have for children, to serve the children and be able to deal with that. All through, you have taught us one thing: we should be united when we are dealing with issues of children. When she comes into an environment, she's a mother, and a real mother to all of us. So I want to thank you for the work that you have done. Being here probably would be more or less like her last physical engagement within the network. One thing that we are discovering is she's not just being here as a mama, but she's actually grooming someone who is going to take over very shortly. And we think that that's a good thing, to be able to groom someone who will take over the mantle, and we hope that that person will do that. And for being here, we would want to present to you a very small token of appreciation for you to come here and be with us.
Who's next? Somebody? Let's keep clapping, Mama J. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. We ask Madam Mwakoli, you are next on the stage. And Dr. Dasome, say a few words.
Yeah, good afternoon. You know, I was just say a few words about the government partners in our country. It's not easy to bring them for development efforts. You know, maybe it's a culture, or the experience we have is something we learn from other countries. So as an organization, in my demonstration says, we always say that knowledge, professionalism, commitment, okay, collaboration, and lasting change. So collaboration is very important. That makes us more full to bring change. What she said when she's presenting, we cannot make and handle alone when it comes the issue of children. We should collaborate among ourselves to make sustainable change. This is what she said. Just I took this one she's presenting. So this lady is from the government, but she acts like a civil society organization. Like she's doing like, yeah, that makes me very happy. Congratulations, keep it up. Maybe I will bring you to Ethiopia to educate our people. Yeah, I think this is a token gift from ECFAT International. So I can give you here now. Yeah.
Let's keep clapping. Thank you. Cornelius. Thomas, I think you are the one talking to Cornelius. Oh, yeah.
That's a surprise. Cornelius, first of all, thank you for coming here. I mean, we know you're kind of trying to get out of this, but we don't let you go. And but also, I really feel like you have very much enriched our discussions here. It was good to have a critical friend in the room, to have someone with so much experience, so much clout, and so much network, who has still so much passion and love for the work we're doing. And so in that sense, thanks for making the trip. Thank you for so many years of service for children, for Africa, for children in the world. For UNICEF, for really kind of pushing the envelope. It's a big beast, UNICEF, and a big administration. It's not so easy to kind of really be an activist in there, but I think you really try to be that and set child protection on the next path. And so for that one, I congratulate you. We congratulate you. And yeah, so we look forward to working with you for many more years, even if you try not to, but we'll call on you. Thank you so much, Cornelius. Here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's take a picture and let's keep clapping. I think Williams is one person we've worked with, and we really will need him, and we keep on working with him. Thank you very much. Yeah. So Demon, I don't know who is the last person. Demon.
Okay. So the last person, I have the opportunity. He came here, he started talking from the very beginning. For some reason, he couldn't stop talking the whole time. And he did exactly that. He kept us smiling, he kept us active. He got the points out. Sometimes you thought you'd make a point, and then you'd seem to not make a point, but at the end you'd get the point. I think you know where I'm going with this conversation, right? And one of the things we have in our African culture, and I think this cuts across any African country, when you come with such a mood and the children love you, and you are a man, they call you uncle. Exactly. And if your name is too complicated for the Africans to understand, they end up shortening it, and I just want to call him Uncle G. Uncle G, thank you very much for coming and braving yourself and keeping us active and lively. We've laughed, we've enjoyed the time, we've thought through what you've led us through, and also thank you for accepting to come and take over the office of ECPAT and lead us as a network. And I think ECPAT has the right person to lead us through this session, this season, where we can grow our network, our net worth, and also expand. Thank you for accepting to stand for the children, the girls, the boys exploited all over the globe, and be that voice, and be that face for us. Thank you very much. And from Africa, specifically Eastern Southern Africa, may you look at this every morning. I don't know where you're going to put it, but may you remember all these smiles in this room, and we are all saying, Asante Sana. photo time, so keep clapping as they get a photo. We're not yet finished. Keep clapping.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Diamond, for doing that. That guy going down is the chair of the ECRN, East African Child Rights Network. He's the chair of the CSO Forum. He's a chair of so many things, I think, for the whole of Africa. So I think he's in the league with Guillaume. We want to thank all of you again. Let's meet at 6:30. 6:45 for this Stepping Stone movie that we're going to watch, all of us. And for the Kenyan participants who will not be here with tomorrow, we thank you very much for staying until late. And I know that we've already started doing the connections. We'll be here still for more connections, but tomorrow it will be majorly for the ECPAT members. Asanteni sana, God bless you, and have a nice evening. Let's meet here at 6:45. Those who have not picked their transport allowance for please pass by the secretariat near where we were taking our tea and just pick your transport. There's some little transport for you. I know most of you have picked, but those who have not picked, pass by there. Thank you very much.